Hello and welcome to Transformations Cafe, where we're serving light as bold as love. I'm your host, Ken Marks. Transformations Cafe is brought to you by the Institute for Global Transformation. We're a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization, and our vision is a world working together to utilize the power, love, and wisdom of higher consciousness to benefit humanity and the planet. Our mission is to support transformations in consciousness and in the way humanity interacts with one another so as to bring about positive change in the world individually and collectively. We invite you to please visit us at theglobaltransformation.org. That's one word, theglobaltransformation.org. And if you would like to join our community, we've got both free and paid member options. You can see those under the join feature in our main menu across the top bar. And then if you would like to support the work of IFGT, including programs like this one, there's a donate button that'll take you right over to PayPal, and we'd love any support you care to give. This program is being recorded and will be published on IFGT's YouTube channel. So we invite you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to the channel. And if you would like to be notified when this program and other new material are published on our channel, you can hit the little bell icon and select the notification options. We produce Transformations Cafe in front of a live audience, and we have several folks joining us today. And so for those of you, this is not just an interview program between myself and our guest, but an opportunity for those joining live to also participate in the conversation. If you would like to do so, we would ask our live audience to please use the chat feature and not the raise hand feature, so we can make sure that we see that you have a question. If you would like to interact directly with a guest, just type the letter Q, and that will be my signal that you would like to actually come on camera and talk directly with our guests. Otherwise, you can just type your question in the chat and I'll read them and get to as many as we can. So with that, the mystery guest should now be revealed. Her name is Debra Oliver. And Debra was born in Southern California to a family in show business. After attending Juilliard School for the Performing Arts in the inaugural class of the drama division, she returned to the West Coast and launched her own method of actor training. She founded a theater company in San Francisco and began to write screenplays. Debra is also a lifelong student of the ancient wisdom. She entered the Arcane School at the age of 19, studied Gurdjieff with J.G. Bennett at Sherborne House in England, and studied with Torquem Saradarian for 20 years. And those are people, I can put the spelling in the chat, but two very interesting people, both Armenian descent, if I read that correctly when I looked them up a little bit earlier today, very interesting. Deborah's also completed teacher training in the applied wisdom as set forth by Lucille Cederkrans. She strives to bring this wisdom into practical application in her work with conflict resolution. Debra began her professional career as a mediator working with the Arizona Attorney General's Civil Rights Unit. She's been a mediator, facilitator, and trainer in conflict resolution since 1989. She has served over 10,000 clients and trainees in the US, Nepal, and Russia, while serving a variety of businesses, nonprofits, and state agencies. She also specializes in restorative justice. Debra has worked with law enforcement agencies and municipalities, providing mediation, training, and community dialogue services, especially in response to community crises. Debra put down permanent roots in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1997, where she founded her company, Common Ground Mediation Services, and we'll include a couple of URLs in the program notes where you can find out more about her organization or company, Common Ground, and also more about wisdom teachings, and she's got a website. Well, so we will make sure to include those URLs in the show notes, and I can throw them in the chat if people would like to see them as well. So just a little bit more, I wanted to mention, so Deborah and I met as classmates in a course of study of the ancient wisdom taught by another one of this program's previous guests, Georgia Lambert. And during one of the lessons, a question came to my mind regarding possible analogies between the rise of Kundalini energy through the 7 major chakras and the level of hierarchical needs as described in Abraham Maslow's well-known hierarchy of needs. And Deborah shared with me on the side that she has seen such correlations and agreed that there is a connection, and invited me to have a conversation one-on-one outside of class. And that's led to some great conversations with Deborah that I've had the privilege of enjoying, and then led to asking if she would be a guest on this program and share more of what she's done. So she has done an amazing job, which you're about to see at least part of, because we won't be able to fit all of this work that she provides in a day-long training, but she's taken the original Maslow model and extrapolated it to work beyond the individual, and then is going to show us how she has integrated this in her work in mediation, and then weaving in the ancient wisdom as well. It's really fascinating, and it's very fitting for her to be a guest on this program, because part of IFGT's mission is to bring the wisdom and consciousness into everyday life. And so this Deborah is a great living example of how that can be done, and the great success she's had doing that. So we're going to share several of Deborah's slides, and then again, as we have the opportunity for questions after she's through presenting them, we can carry on with that conversation. So with that, Deborah, welcome to Transformations Cafe.
Thank you so much, Ken, and thank you all for coming to this. As a mediator, I'm always looking for common ground, and I learned very quickly as a young mediator that certain things are always going to be intractable until you can dig deeper below them, such as, this is my position and I'm not moving from it. Okay, so guess what? That ends the negotiation right there. So that's when I really started sort of inhaling Maslow, because our common ground, I mean, for all of our differences as human beings, we all have certain needs, and well-being stems from having these needs met in a sane and rational way, which still has not been accomplished. But the basic pyramid for Maslow that he developed, this is my graphic because I'm doing little takeoffs on Da Vinci's man here. But you read it from the bottom and it evolves from the bottom to the top. The physiological needs, food, sleep, health, cleanliness, food, warmth, shelter, really are not negotiable. They need to be met, period. Nobody should have to negotiate whether they can survive, right? So safety needs are really important, and security and stability, but safety needs aren't just, am I physically safe from attack or danger, but it's economic as well. I don't feel safe unless the economy of my life is in order, right? So it's protection, structure, order, law, limits, and freedom from fear, anxiety, and chaos. So safety is a really big topic. And those two lower levels, if these needs down there are not met, people are easily traumatized and triggered, and the governing factor in the brain for having those needs challenged is the amygdala, or I really like the vernacular, the lizard brain, right? The lizard comes up when those needs are not met. And so when we get into more relational dynamics, we're rising into the belonging or love needs, which are every bit as important to well-being and the ability to thrive, as opposed to the failure to thrive, as safety needs and physical needs. And we go up to esteem needs, self-respect, self-esteem, esteem of others, achievement, adequacy, mastery, competence, and then self-actualization, fulfillment of abilities, talents, and self. So this is the basic hierarchy of needs that Maslow presented to us. And in his writings, he referred to and began to describe some characteristics of what he referred to as the growth hierarchy of needs. But to my knowledge, and I have dug around, he never codified that on a pyramid such as he did with the deficiency hierarchy. He calls this one deficiency because people feel deficient and that the needs are outside themselves, and you have to go outside yourself and motivated by desire or other motivating factors where you're really at the effect of life and not at cause. The growth hierarchy, I began to collect the things he said about that, and then eventually developed my own complete version of the growth hierarchy, which we can look at. Maybe take a look at that slide. The growth hierarchy gets born, if you will. It's very much a shift in consciousness that begins to really bring the growth hierarchy into focus. The shift in consciousness is from living as if you are deficient and have to go hunter-gathering out into the world to get your needs met. The person on this growth hierarchy doesn't feel deficient, they feel full. They feel full of inspiration, ideas, that they live in a benevolent universe, that their main need is to give of themselves and to serve, and so forth. So even the physiological needs are a little, they have basic needs, they have to eat and sleep and so on, but really their focus is on creating an integration of the body, psyche, mind, integrating, okay, the ability to focus, to have sustained efforts of creativity, the reliability of the body and mind and psyche, not working at odds, but working together toward a realized goal. And they need a sense of even physically, they need to have an ability to be inspired, and they are focused also on regeneration and play. Playfulness and the sense that, which, think about children, they're sort of born on the growth hierarchy. Everything is the discovery, everything is, oh my goodness, and joy in the morning, waking up and approaching life. And so their safety needs are also very different. They don't feel so defensive. They don't really tend to feel defensive, but they say, well, if you just live with common sense and reason, and if somebody's upset, dig down to the root cause of it and do something to heal the wounds or relieve the stress. But they have a real sense of responsibility and fair play, and a reasonable appreciation of cause and effect, and a total willingness to make mistakes and to learn from them. So that's not something people on the deficiency hierarchy feel comfortable doing. And they need to give love and nurture and support and improve the lot of others. And they need to manifest a vision to create better conditions for themselves and others, and to contribute to an environment where everybody is honored and they have dignity and even perhaps a sense of calling or a sense of a personal destiny or path. And self-mastery is a goal as a foundation for wider service. And their self-actualization is where they feel that they have realized their purpose for being on the planet, their purpose for living, and a sense of total integration of self and the world, joy in living, despite circumstances, and the will to persist regardless of obstacles and so forth. So you get the idea that the growth hierarchy is a more spacious, loving, as opposed to fearful or feeling lacking or deficient or competitive. So these are just basic differences. It's very typical for someone on the deficiency hierarchy to be competitive, and then the growth hierarchy to want to be cooperative. And in deficiency, there is an overarching or overlighting sense of scarcity. And in the growth, there is a sense of abundance. And in the deficiency hierarchy, people tend to be transactional. I'll give you this if you give me that. So, but what's the payoff? There has to be something more concrete exchanged. It isn't payment enough to just be loved or someone being kind to you. It's like, well, what do you want from me? That kind of thing. It's transactional, whereas the people on the growth hierarchy tend more to be relational. You know, let's see, you know, where we can have a relationship here. Even if it's just a telemarketer calling you, interrupting your day. Well, I'm not going to scream at them. I'm going to say, well, thank you. And I know you have a hard job and you get a lot of rejections. And meanwhile, this is not a service that's something I'm in need of right now, but have a great day. You know, I mean, just, you know, and it's, anyway, people in deficiency tend to feel at the effect of life. They're at the effect. Things are happening to them. And below that, there's a real customary sense of victimization. Whereas people on the growth hierarchy feel at cause. Yeah, this condition is definitely not amenable to human happiness. What can I do to fix it? Or, you know, what can we do to make it better? And instead of a sense of victimization, there's a sense of responsibility. And how people identify is really important. On the deficiency hierarchy, they tend to think of themselves as, I am a separate physical body. That's who I am. I'm this physical body. It's subject to the slings and arrows of a dangerous world. It's going to die, therefore I'm going to die. It's, you know, it's just the whole frame of feeling that I am a separate physical body. Whereas on the growth hierarchy, it's more like, well, I am consciousness. I am that person, that being, that awareness that is engaging with life. And there's a sense of spaciousness. And they may not consciously say, oh yes, I am consciousness. I am not my body. Well, they may not have described it to themselves that way, but it is how they experience the world. And therefore there's spaciousness, there's fluidity, there's there's a big world and universe and cosmos out there. So they don't necessarily feel in their experience of life day to day as being other than consciousness. Yeah, they know they have a body and it's subject to the slings and arrows. However, it there's just a sense of I'm more than that. Let's get on with where we live, right? Deficiency tends to judgment and growth to empathy, comparison versus compassion. Now, this is really important. The deficiency hierarchy tends to grow from outside impacts and challenges and demands and expectations. And on the growth hierarchy, and those who study Lucille will understand this phrase, is self-initiated growth. Self-initiated growth. And whereas deficiency will say, what's in it for me? The growth will say, what's in it for us? Where does it land for us? And deficiency is I want versus I am. So overarchingly, deficiency can tend to be transactional and growth transformative. And I put those graphics there because, not because they mean anything in particular of what the graph was trying to show, but when you look at the deficiency graph, that's kind of what life looks like. It's a cluster of comparisons and different unintegrated things and stuff, and you don't know, like, other than the box it's in, like what's managing it or causing it. It's just this ongoing cluster of things that's happening, right? And there's not a real defined sense of I there. I is something outside that they have to go and achieve. Whereas on the growth hierarchy, it's like this sphere. All these elements that are on the other side are in the sphere, but it's held by both the center and the periphery. So there's integration there that isn't necessarily available to the person on the deficiency hierarchy. And I love this quote from Brené Brown. You either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. So I've also taken the deficiency and growth into the psychology of the corporate structure, the corporate deficiency, the corporate growth hierarchy. And at the end, this is the 8-hour workshop that I do, the training. The final one that I look at is, what is the hierarchy of needs for nations, the body politic, or the family of nations? And it's a really interesting exploration. Anyway, I have talked enough about most of this other than to say, in mediation, rather than try to negotiate positions that are like that, I dig down into what do you need? And when you have conversations with people in a conflict setting, right? It's not about the actions or the behaviors they're kvetching about or arguing, it's about what is needed. If you can dig down to and identify the needs, including growth needs and deficiency needs, then you have something that's alive and present that can be negotiated. And it's the negotiating of the needs. And in mediation, when people start unpacking their stories, why are they in conflict? I'm asking, what do you need here? What's going on? Sometimes it's the first time they ever look at and hear the other person and understand that they also have needs that are not being met. And that evokes, sometimes for the first time, empathy. And with that empathy, you can open the door, because when people get down to a real sharing of their humanity, that's where we're all the same creature. We're all human. We're all worthy of love and a fair shot at life and so forth. Even if the path of our life doesn't, like I do a lot of divorce mediation, well, they don't have to be enemies. They just need a divorce if they need a divorce. And so, they don't have to become gladiators and warriors. They can just say, okay, what do we need here? And what are we going to do to meet the needs and to be within the statutory expectations of the needs, et cetera, and do it in a calm and reasoned, and in the light of goodwill, in the light of wishing well to the other person with whom you shared a good portion of your life. And how do you walk away, blessing them on their path, and so forth. So these needs are really important to me as a conflict resolver, because without articulating them, connecting with them, understanding them, and clearing up expectations about them that might be unrealistic expectations, then they can get on the path of, oh, this isn't going to meet my need here, but I can move over here and get my need met that way. There are options, and it opens them. So that's in a nutshell why I find this Maslow work so valuable in resolving conflict. And there are other tools, other skills, but these needs are fundamental baseline to the whole discussion. So now I'll stop talking and
Yeah, well, that was awesome, and I hope everyone that is here with us live and that sees the recording subsequently should have hopefully been inspired to want to know more, to learn more, to seek you out, to see how this goes. I'm going to make a couple of comments, and then we'll get to, there's a couple of questions, but I wanted to make mention of a few things that occurred to me in our previous conversations as I reviewed the material you shared with me earlier, because there is this very interesting connection between the seemingly everyday types of things that we live with in this human 3D life, like relationships and divorce, or like how do you handle conflict at work or in a neighborhood or in any other setting. But this contrast, especially the last exhibit that you shared with us, where you can see how one might approach this from that deficiency of needs and looking for that external help, and that duality that it's I'm separate, versus if you have, and more kind of in the language of this organization and those who are awakening, if you're on the spiritual path and you're moving toward that growth orientation, you begin to see these things so differently, and how we integrate an awakened consciousness into the 3D world. That's what this model does so beautifully. And if we have time, or if we can incentivize people to see how these then do translate into the corporate world, as a for instance. So you'll have organizations that are just anchored in competitiveness and worry about one thing or another, just their survival and market share, et cetera, versus trying to do good for the world and providing not just a product or a service, but something that betters the world and life for greater and greater populations. And so I think that's important to point out. That's one point I wanted to make. Another is this idea of how the more esoteric energies, Kundalini and the chakras, and how this kind of came to my mind and led to this conversation. Because if you think about the progression of the lower chakras are really at that basic kind of the survival and the security. And then as you move up and up, you get, that's why I kind of thought of Maslow's hierarchy at the beginning. So this is just a great way to see that. And I think if anyone is experiencing any type of a Kundalini energy process, they may see that those different aspects of themselves begin to come online, and they may see that shift from the needs hierarchy to the growth hierarchy type of orientation to life. Then lastly, the point I wanted to make, and then I'll be quiet.
There's some questions in the chat.
The work of IFGT has also kind of included this idea of that we are collectively as humanity moving toward a tipping point where there would be a critical mass of those who have awakened or are on far enough on their spiritual path, so that then there's a shift in across the planet and in humanity as a collective. And it struck me in looking at the models that you shared that they're almost like a roadmap or a guidebook in terms of being able to assess how far along have we come collectively and how close to that tipping point are we. So just wanted to make those points. And
those are great points. And I just want to say, Ken, because one of the questions is, what percentage of the population do you think is shifting onto the growth hierarchy? And I want to say, some people who study or teach Maslow are of the mind that you can't get to growth until you've gone all the way up every single step of the ladder in deficiency to self-actualization. That is not true in my experience, okay? Some people can be at the bedrock, at the bottom of the physical needs and the safety needs, and just stand up and say, I am I, and I am moving forward. I don't care if I don't have shoes and I can't read or write yet, but I'm going forward because I am here. I was born to be something, and so forth. So their self-initiated growth starts before the other needs are met at all. So really the self-initiated versus I am a victim is the biggest shift there is. And I think that the question, what percentage of the population, it's difficult to say with any precision, but I think there is a growing trend. Let me say, from the time I was born to now, it's shifted hugely numerically. And, I don't think we have to get to 50% of people on the growth hierarchy to have a total shift in our world. Okay. We don't even need 40%. I think it can be done as a lever can do a boulder with a strong, coherent, conscious, and deliberate group of people who bring it forward, make it safe, demonstrate it, live it, show it, model it. It's not unattractive. It's just people sometimes don't have the imagination to, but when they see it, it's like, oh, I want some of that, right? So also there is that saying, and I don't mean this in a comparative or negative way, but there is the saying from DK that the greater can include the lesser, but the lesser can't always include the greater. And so one of the things you see is that, for example, I do a lot of workplace work, conflict resolution, that if somebody on the growth hierarchy comes into an organization and there aren't many other growth hierarchy people, that person can scare the dickens out of the ones who are on it, because they like to take risks and timesheets don't mean anything to them. And why wouldn't I want to work 80 hours a week on what's my passion? Well, you can't, because we can't pay you overtime because the budget says, but I have this vision and that's what this company is for. Well, you know, there's going to be some conflict there. Okay. So, so if you're on the growth hierarchy, you're trying to bring a new idea and everything, you have to really listen for and allay the fears, okay, that people on the deficiency hierarchy may have. Because why? Otherwise, they go into the lizard brain and you're mud wrestling fear and trauma and everything else. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And,
I want to ask if you could, you made a reference to DK. I don't know if everybody here
I'm sorry,
or watching later might know who that is. So
that's DK is found in the writings of Alice A. Bailey. So
one of the
DK was
ascended masters.
One of the masters who, he's the master who brought through the teaching that she put her name on.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a couple other questions. I want to read one from Chris, but before I do, just at least one person has asked about getting the PDFs, and I know this is your work and your creation, so I'm not certainly going to offer that up, but just to make sure that if people want to access this, I did put the URLs for your sites in the chat, and how could they get access to that?
So, well, I am giving a training, a workshop with the 8 hours of information. This starting July 30th from noon to 4 Mountain Time, and this is all on Zoom, and then another 4 hours on the following Sunday, August 6th from noon to 4. So if you email me or go on my website and check out the training tab, that you can click on that. I am offering that this summer, and I'll probably offer another one in the fall, just to because sometimes people go on vacations in the summer. So what would you say applying these distinctions to allay conflict between the woke ideologies? Okay. We need a serious conversation in this country. We really do, because the whole idea of making a label called woke and then militarizing or weaponizing that phrase, what a thing to be against. Awareness, consciousness, that's the bedrock of our humanity. And that's the point. That's the point of that label and the ones who are wielding it to engineer a consensus that is fundamentally anti-human and not really willing to embrace and satisfy and use government to satisfy or meet even the deficiency needs of humanity. So I would say to that person, sit them down and talk about their needs, not preach Maslow, but ask questions. Well, do you feel that people who represent you in government should care about your food, medical care, housing, water quality? You know, are these things important to you? You can have a conversation about this chart. You know, is it important for everyone to participate in the economy? Is a really, you know, radically unequal economy that which you find nurturing or which brings safety to people? You know, you can have those conversations. You can look at some of the needs and start to have a conversation about them, because again, it takes it out of the position and brings it down to the bedrock of what are the needs. But woke by itself is not negotiable. You just have to unpack it.
Well, what do you mean it's not negotiable? It's Diane here.
Hi, Diane.
Oh, because I was wondering whether you've ever actually had that like come up, because it's a huge, let's say, I would say source of divisiveness. And, you know, the original, what woke meant, or what you're talking about, like, you know, everybody should have human rights. That doesn't mean everybody should be exactly equal, but human, you know, the right to, to be respected and all that stuff. But it seems like that woke has become like a Frankenstein monster, and then there are people who are reacting against it. So have you actually had that come up where you've had to deal with it?
Yeah, I've had just about every variety of human conflict there is, you know, including working with people in the criminal justice system, right? So yeah, you know, the thing is, and one of the other trainings, short, not 8 hours, but short, that I'm planning to offer soon is about framing and reframing. Okay, so woke is an artificial frame, and it's very interesting because the linguist, my favorite, George Lakoff, states that people think in terms of frames, and frames, effective framing is equally what's excluded from the frame. And frames, once established, are hermetically sealed. You can only think within the frame, only reason with what the frame allows. So destructive framing is how every dictator comes to power. And we can break those frames. We can liberate ourselves from them, but we have to realize that it is a frame and that it's artificial. It's an artificial frame. Now, there are things, I mean, I basically identify as pretty progressive on the political spectrum, but there are things that the Democrats do that drive me nuts. Okay, there are things that people who tout their liberalism think is really appropriate and funny, and it's not. I mean, it's really deeply offensive to a lot of people. So it's not all one side or the other. You know, you have to unpack it. And basically how we do that is through active listening, dialogue, you know, setting up a safe place to have the conversation, using a neutral third party if needed, right, to really unpack it. And frames are devastating to people. They are so, it's a method of control that is so crushing to the human spirit, done improperly, done for the purpose of control and limitation and so forth. So reframing and learning about frames is really vital skill to have if you're working with people. So go to my website. I'm going to be posting that fairly soon. It's all part of the overall mediation training that I do, but I'm finding that there's so much need out there that whether you want to be a mediator or not, you deserve these skills, right? So I'm chunking them down, taking them out of my training for mediators and putting them in manageable bite-sized chunks that people can then just grab onto and run with. Anybody else? There was any?
Yeah, I've got a question that was put in the chat or just sent directly to me, so I want to make sure we get to it. And I just also want to mention that I did put Deborah's email in the chat as well. So if you want to reach out to her directly, and again, the URLs that were mentioned during the intro are in the chat as well. So this, Chris submitted a question. How do you persuade someone that believes the transitioning from a transactional position over to a transformational one thinks it means his or her taxes will go up? That a transformational position is socialism through the back door.
Okay, that is a voice of deficiency squared. Okay, we're talking about really consciousness. See, that goes with woke over there with Diane, that consciousness is going to cost you money, right? It's not, consciousness doesn't raise your taxes. Consciousness expands your ability to be spacious and meet life in a creative way. So again, that's an artificial frame. There are people that are very, very powerful and wealthy who have been doing this framing of humanity for a very long time. Very long time, and they're really good at it. And so we have to first learn to unpack, to break those frames inside ourselves, right? To where that kind of question doesn't trigger us in the solar plexus and in the lizard brain, but that you really can step back and look at that and go, oh my goodness, what wound is talking there? What fear is driving that train? What need that isn't met is talking right now? And that kind of questioning isn't judgment, it's curiosity. It's like, I really need to, somebody's in quicksand over there. Let me get a rope, but you don't argue it with them at that level. Again, positions can only do this, but if you unpack them, you can find the needs and dig into the common humanity and get somewhere. Does that make sense?
It does to me, and it reminds me of this, the contrast graphic that you put up, or compare and contrast, like they used to say in essay questions, right, in school.
Yeah.
And but it's this idea of coming to the conversation from a place of love and compassion versus fear and contraction.
Right.
That's the approach to take. And You also reminded me several times of this idea that these changes and that I would imagine many of us, maybe most people, have some parts of themselves that are more deficiency oriented and then
Yeah.
more oriented, and that it shifts. And this idea that our growth and evolution individually and collectively it's not linear, and it's
No.
not just a circle, but it's this upward spiral.
It's a spiral,
Yeah,
because you're going to come back and revisit everything in you on the deficiency hierarchy at some point in your life.
right.
When you meet it, are you going to succumb to it or transmute it? That's the choice, right? Anne had a question though,
Yeah.
and I want to get to Anne. You had a question?
I love the whole thing about reframing. And it sounds like to me, it's a really complicated thing, because each person that you're talking to, you have to reframe according to what their needs are and where they're coming from. But my question was, what would be a simple reframing when someone starts talking about woke as being a bad thing? I mean, like, is there something
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, you would start with, I'm not clear what you mean by woke. Can you help me understand what that means to you?
Yeah. Okay.
What's the behavior of that word woke that is offensive to you? What needs do you have that are threatened by that label woke? What does that mean, right? I don't understand what that means.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. I see.
Yeah, because most stuff has to get unpacked.
What?
Most conflict dynamics have to be sort of frozen in a, a screen grab, right? Let's look at this now. Let's sit back and look at this screen grab and understand what's driving it, right? And it has to be unpacked. It's not always a 10-second wand waved by the magician, right? It's more an interaction and a relational extension of yourself to someone else. And they may not want it, and then there's free will. Just bless them on their way, because they are all going to get it eventually. Everyone's going to wake up and be who they are, which is this grand, really amazing gift from God or something, I mean.
This is also, I think, kind of gets back to this idea of collective evolution toward a tipping point where there is an overall shift and it's interesting that the term woke is on everyone's mind. Those of us in Florida have some leadership that is making their campaign about this, and the explanation of it seems to be elusive, but it is a fear-based approach to trying to attract attention and support. And the point that you're making, among others tonight, is that meeting that fear with love, with compassion, and really that's what the evolution toward the tipping point is about, the shift toward love and light. And those words kind of get thrown around, but light in the sense of illumination and of enlightenment, and not in a egotistical sense, but causing those reframing shifts that you're talking about, so that the fear factor is just allowed to that energy is allowed to dissolve or transmute into something that is other than fear. And I think critical about it. And here we are seeing these very practical, real world applications to that. There was a question that Chris has made some comments, but Dina raised a question earlier. I'll see if I can get back to it. She said, do you have divorce or other clients who just don't want to give up the fight? And if so, what have you found out about those who want to perpetuate fight or battle? It's more of that
Yeah,
than kind of
right. Yes, I have met people who don't want to give up the fight. And I will try my level best to unpack that and to meet it with compassion and patience. And if they don't want to give up the fight, they have alternatives. They have free will. They don't have to mediate. They can go to court and really learn the hard way what it means and what it costs to not give up the fight. Some people just have to learn the way they learn.
Thank you.
Some like the battle regardless of who wins. Sure, they'll fall on the sword for the sake of doing battle one more time.
Right. And that could get into their persona and karma, Ray energy makeup for this,
Yeah.
if we want to get into it a little bit. So,
Yeah.
Dina
I
had
imagine as someone coming from deficiency needs based on life experiences, I can't see the rest of the question. Can you?
I would imagine the transition to growth would take time and have to be experienced.
It does have to be experienced, but it may or may not take time. A lot of people who experience sudden, harsh life events, near-death experiences, tragedies, painful episodes, will awaken pretty quickly, compared with someone who's just got no problems in life and is cruising along on, cruise control, right? That if there's not much demanding you to really bring your full presence to an event, you can cruise along for quite a while and not be challenged to meet yourself.
That's another great reminder of how we can move individually and then contribute to the collective evolution. And we've had the honor of hosting Dr. Yvonne Kason a couple of times on this program, and she co-founded and leads an organization called Spiritual Awakenings International, coined the term spiritually transformative experiences, because in addition to NDEs, there are a whole host that she has written several books about now, that these transformative experiences can be quite sudden, and they may not always be blissful and suddenly you're in nirvana, but they do cause a shift, and they cause a reframing of how we see the world. And more often than not, a common element is that a shift toward, in your terms, or the terms you're sharing with us, more of a growth orientation and away from the needs deficiency.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Just, I guess, more of a clarification. Is it okay if I speak my question?
Sure.
Because I'm typing them kind of. So I work with incarcerated youth, and there's a whole little dance that it takes to get to a point where, you can teach and all that.
Yeah.
But I was thinking that if you're living, if your life experience, as limited as it is always in jeopardy, your safety's in jeopardy, it would take time to get to that feeling of safety. to then be able to move up the hierarchy. Like if you're constantly in jeopardy, if the lion's chasing you or whatever, you can't really move up on the hierarchy of needs. That's my question. Can you?
Well,
And you talked about the
yes,
ability-
I also have spent over a decade working with incarcerated youth, or, you know, in restorative justice, right? I have one, I'll just share one scenario of a young man who was referred to us by the probation office. And he was a junior in high school. His parents were both heroin addicts. They didn't provide for him. In fact, they tried to traffic him to get money for drugs. And so he had to leave. He had to leave home. And the only way he could immediately survive was to join a gang. And so he did, and his need for shelter and so on, belonging, were met. He loved to mentor newer, younger gang members. He was very brilliant, and he taught them, for example, how to disarm a very expensive security system with a refrigerator magnet. Okay. And this kid had a 3.5 GPA. He could draw freehand with no compass or ruler, a dodecahedron that was perfect. He was very artistic. He was very scientific. And so he had to steal and involve, you know, to bring income into the gang. So he broke into a duplex. Neither tenant or person was home. And he stole all the jewelry, computers, electronics, and everything for both homes, and fenced them at the pawn shop. And of course was found. He was arrested and so forth, and then referred to restorative justice. And when we were doing intake with him, we saw who he is. He has this immense desire he wanted to be an architect. He wanted to be an engineer. He wanted to, that's why he kept up his GPA and everything and so on. And then we did intake with the two people, the two homeowners. Turns out they were both retired teachers. And so when we were in the circle together and he was telling his story, because he had to speak first and say, this is what I did. I take responsibility for what I did. This is why I did it. This is where I was coming from when I did it. They were in tears. They were just knocked out by this kid. And so they, instead of saying, you have to get a job and pay us back for they immediately came from growth hierarchy on this. They took him under his wing. They went to his parent teacher. They got him housing, you know, independent living housing, and helped him write a grant for college to the Gates Foundation. And he got in, and he's like out of engineering school now and is paying them back, you know. I mean, he would go and pull weeds and mow their lawns or paint their house or do, you know, he would do stuff like that. But he got seen as who he is and what his potential is by these two people. So in that program, I found often it was like these young offenders who were at the bottom of the hierarchy of needs, but were gonna be growth about it somehow, right? It's like their guardian angel leads them to don't go to that house, go to this house.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so beautiful. So Dina, I don't know if that helps. I mean, they need support. They need to be seen. They need to be acknowledged that their needs are legitimate. If they're at the bottom of the hierarchy, they were born, they have a right to be here. And those of us who have those needs met need to do what we can to make sure their needs are met. Does that?
That did help. Thank you so much. That was an inspiring story. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Another reminder of one of my favorite parables about the old Chinese farmer with the one horse and one son.
Oh, right. Yes.
Basically the idea that things that seem to be positive in the immediate aftermath can turn out to be other than, and things that seem tragic in the initial context turn out to be fortune. And I think that's also goes along with either helps us with shifting from needs to growth, or it's one of the outcomes that we can have less reaction. I think that was one of the characteristics that you pointed out in that comparison too, that we're kind of in the needs hierarchy, we're kind of in the moment and stuck in the event versus having that broader perspective to see that.
And part of what shifts us is one person who cared.
Right.
One person who gave a darn, right? Who takes the time to stop, look, listen, and be relational.
Right. Versus transactional.
Yeah.
Well, that's an uplifting note. I want to respect your time needs so you can continue your learning and growth directly in a class tonight. And this has just been an outstanding session. These programs are extremely rewarding for me to be able to participate in. And I'm so grateful that you met you and that we had the chance to share the class and you agreed to do this. Just again, as a reminder to folks, if you want more information, Deborah's two website URLs are in the chat, as well as the email address. And then we'll put the URLs in the YouTube program notes as well. If you want us to share the email there as well, we can. If you prefer not to have that.
Yeah, no, let me say this, and if anybody's interested in attending the 2-day, 8-hour, 4 hours a day Maslow training, please do email me, and because I need to send you a registration form, etc. You can also and because I'm doing it on Zoom, without that email, I can't get the materials to you. Okay. So you can go and register on my website if you go to trainings and then scroll down to where the Maslow training is. You can register, pay the tuition. It's $90 for the full 8 hours, 2 days there, but I still need an email from you so I can get you the materials. Okay.
That sounds great. Well, again, thank you, Deborah. It's been a joy, and thanks to everyone that participated live, and those of you who see this later in YouTube land. Hope you'll get something out of this and see it soon enough, maybe to participate in the training, or I'm guessing you may offer it again. So
yeah, I'll be offering it again together with other bite-sized trainings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Dina. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See you
you.
next time.